Now, MOUZ Sports has a new roster, of course. They signed it basically at the beginning of this year, but the first event was supposed to be IM Katowice, but spoiler, they didn't actually even get to take the full lineup for all the matches. So actually, we've never really seen the new MOUZ Sports properly play in terms of what you'd want to see to know how good they are. I'll also add, by the way, they're technically actually, I'll try to remember this myself, they're technically actually now called MOUZ, as in MOUZ, the shortened version previously. They've done that thing that all these teams do, like TSM, where you just become the abbreviation and you get rid of the old full version of them, which was MOUZ Sports. So technically it's not supposed to be MOUZ Sports anyway, but you know what? Old habits die hard. Now, they've obviously played at IM Katowice. They've managed to actually punch above their weight, finished 9th to 12th. But that was obviously using JDC at certain points in time, who's one of their academy players, instead of BMAS, who is obviously the Lithuanian player they've had in the team for a while, because he unfortunately had a positive test and therefore couldn't play all the matches. They had a pretty mixed bag at the event. Like, they lost to FaZe in 3 maps, but then again, FaZe is a really good team at the tournament. They beat Entropic, actually a pretty talented set of up-and-comers over the last few months. They lost to Vitality, one of the best new rosters in the world. They beat OG, actually a team that was also looking like they were having a little bit of a honeymoon period, and then they lost to NIP without Device, but no one really knows why that NIP without Device is so good. They just seem to match up with everyone, and they're always in a game. So actually, all in all, pretty good, and especially when you consider having the stand-in as well as a new roster, also featuring massively inexperienced players at time. So here's the thing. This is actually a rare case of where a team who's a lower team has lost a star player, and I actually think that, and by the way, a star player better than anyone you can replace with one move. I actually think the team itself, though, actually looks like it's going to be better now without Rops, not because of Rops, but because of what they've done to the team instead and how they've remolded it. And quite frankly, I even think there's an angle where you can hype it more than the Rops lineup. Like for me, the MOUZ lineup with Rops beyond the fluke Flashpoint 3 run was just all about like, right, it's the Rops show, and then, oh wow, actually Frozen can join us sometimes. And he's not that far from being pretty good himself, but then again, 1.5 superstar players doesn't get it done in World Counter-Strike, especially when the other pieces actually are very lacking. Dexter, not that good at IGL. Acor was actually appalling with the AWP most of the time, and BMAS just never really delivered. He's not really a top tier 1 type player, right? So then to me, the story quickly became, right, how hard can Rops carry? Well, even then, it's not like Nico and Simple from past years. So you know what? Fuck it. When does he join the next team? When does he join FaZe Clan, OG, Team Liquid, whoever it might have been he went to join? So as a result, to me, now that he's gone, this lineup would have just been dead in the water. Because then it would just be, what, just the Frozen show only? Or then it'd be like, is Acor ever going to get good? But what's clever is, because people were actually quite excited about MOUZ NXT, the Academy squad that plays in the We Play Academy League, like people were saying that the Academy squad was better than the main roster of MOUZ, even obviously he eventually outranked them in the HLTV rankings. People were saying maybe they should promote the whole team. So since people had excitement about that angle, I actually think it's quite interesting, because if people don't know, as far as I know, the MOUZ NXT team was the best Academy squad. Na'Vi might have looked like the better squad, but they had m0NESY, who basically was just far and away the prodigy of that set of Academy players. Now, after m0NESY though, Torzsi is the obvious pickup, by the way, to get. Like, he's another player, seems like a slam dunk. They will be a tier 1 player, if not now or soon, in the next 6 months to a year, whatever, when they get their shot, basically. And so, in my opinion, yes, it was necessitated that some team gave this guy a chance. So let's start with that player, the Academy squad promotion, because he's not just any player that's coming in a la BMAS to FaZe years ago, like, bring the random guy in and let him just fill whatever role. No, this guy is an AWPer. He's coming in to be the primary AWPer, to replace Acor, and this guy Torzsi, because as far as I know, like, ZS is actually a letter, it's just been written Romanized, obviously, in Hungarian, and they say it's supposed to be pronounced like the letter S in the word pleasure. So since it's pleasure, I'm saying Torzsi, because I assume that must be similar enough to how it is. Anyway, this guy, like I said before, is a clear talent. I can totally get why they're giving him a shot, especially if you're MOUZ Sports. Like, this isn't a gamble like when G2 brought in m0NESY. Actually, on their team, he could even be the best player now, and it's worth the shot. Like, they're not actually at that big a level, and they're not getting big-name superstar players, so they have to gamble that they're getting the next Rops or Frozen, etc., before they are Rops or Frozen now, because otherwise MOUZ wouldn't be able to get them. So this actually makes perfect sense for the ecosystem, and where MOUZ, the team, is actually located, because it's a cheap pickup. You just take him straight from the academy into the main squad. Who even knows how that works contract-wise, by the way? I don't even know if they have a different contract for that, if you get the sort of benefit NBA or NFL style, like a rookie contract at the beginning. I'd imagine there's all sorts of economic upside to this, and because he's in your academy squad, if it doesn't work out, you can send him back the other way, or you can sell him to someone else who wants to gamble on him. So when you consider MOUZ already had massive issues getting A-Core integrated. He just looks shot completely at the moment. And for me, he's only going to turn it around if he gets a great in-game leader around him who can figure out his game again, redesign it, file off the rough edges and get him honed into what he was when he was in Mad Lions a few years ago now. So to me, there is real potential now at the AWP position of MOUZ, which is pretty cool actually. You look around the top scene, there's the elite AWPers who are some of the best players in the whole game. After that, it thins out real quick. And for example, you could make a case right now, yes, inexperience aside, torzsi is actually a more impressive pickup as an AWPer right now than like Farlig for Astralis, for example. So I'm very interested to see how this works. It makes up for some of the firepower and the star power you lost with ROPS potentially. So the key thing for me is this. Actually similar to the Monacy and G2 scenario, torzsi doesn't have to actually be the best player in MOUZ spots either, in MOUZ rather. He can actually essentially just chill and be arguably the second best player, do his job, and they can still be a very good team because they have Frozen. And this is the key detail of this team. The most important thing they had to do in this team was keep Frozen, and they've done it. They've got him to sign, we don't know how many years, I don't think he was mentioned what the deals, but they said he'd extended his contract. Frozen is the star of this MOUZ spots team, and he should be. I think if he has time, the next year or so, next year or two in MOUZ spots, he has a real chance to become what Matt ROPS just was to MOUZ spots. Like the star, way better than the team, overqualified, signs again, you build around him, you let him do whatever he needs to, he fully gets to explore his game, get all his spots, and then you get to see how far can Frozen actually go. And if you look at how old they are, and you track the timelines, and when they've had chances and what roles they were in, he's been through the different roles when he was in the MOUZ spots with Carrigan back in the day, and they swapped him around different positions, and now he's been the second fiddle under ROPS. Now it's time for Frozen to have his team, to get his treatment of Nico, ROPS. Now it's Frozen's time to be the star. So to me, I think that at the end of this year, if things go well, he gets like ROPS. He gets to earn a buyout rather, and get signed to a top team, a contender, a better team in the top 10, either at the end of this year or after the majors or something, when people are willing to shell out basically. I think he'll be in position then to be what ROPS was at the end of last year, basically, where you knew it was going to happen eventually. It's just who and which top team is he going to. So I also think, by the way, that the team can potentially actually be more competitive if Frozen continues the kind of form he was already showing, becomes the man, and then torzsi just shows what he's kind of shown so far, some of that potential. Doesn't have to be mega. I think they're potentially more competitive in terms of a better, well-rounded team with more dangerous weapons overall. The problem is, we're talking relative to the strength of their peers. There are going to be more top teams. In fact, the top 10 is probably going to be pretty full this year, so I don't necessarily know that they can be a top 10 team, even though last year just being pretty decent could get you like 8th to 10th in the world, right? I think this guy, listen, torzsi has potential. I've seen some of the potential of Frozen, and I've seen it on LAN. So as a result, this guy can become an even greater player than he is now, and he's already a pretty good fucking player. He's only 19 years old now, guys. Do people realise that? Like, it feels like he's been around for years and years. But that means the shit he was doing in 2019 with the Carrigan lineup that went to like top 2 or 3 in the world, who was making all those LAN finals and winning like Pro League. He was 17 years old, mate. Carrigan is a fucking miracle worker. That guy, he just has his head so right for how to use different pieces in the game. Then you've got another new name, right? So we had torzsi come in. We're keeping Frozen. That's key. Then you bring in NBK. Now, this was a big shock to a lot of people. He was thought to either be out of the door, potentially semi-retired from playing. If he was going to play again, people thought it'd be in Valorant, or maybe he's just a streamer, or maybe he's just a streamer even in Valorant, maybe. But I know that actually the whole time behind the scenes, he was looking for offers in both games. He still potentially would play in CS if the offers there. He didn't necessarily want to leave OG, by the way. It's obviously a fabulously decorated player who still believes he can play. And by the way, never lost his drive for the game as far as I can tell. Also, if he was going to stay in CSGO, people probably would speculate, probably stay with French players, right? Like, why not make a new team with Kenny S and fucking Amanek, and why not go with some of the double pony guys and make a new team there? Maybe you could be the IGL of that team, since he wanted to IGL so often. I actually think NBK is a great addition to this particular team. Dexter, I think, has been an underwhelming IGL. In fact, it reminds me of the whole Hampus and Nip thing, or to a lesser degree, because I thought he was all right, actually. Next in G2, it's like, listen, as an individual player, you're good, but what are you doing as an IGL? And why, if you're good as an individual player, do then people give you a pass or just assume you're equally as good as an IGL? I haven't seen anything as an IGL from Dexter to suggest that he's a top or tier 1 IGL, quite frankly. So I think he's pretty underwhelming. And obviously he has fuck all experience on LAN, leading like top tier 1 teams to go to big... He hasn't done any of that shit. So as a result, NBK can help him with that. Keyword help, not take over, help. He can mid-round, he can secondary call, he can call on the CT side. By the way, he can essentially do anything that's necessary, and it will be needed with Dexter in this team, in my opinion. And that whole thing of like, I'm a CT side caller, usually I don't think that's anything. I think it's usually very overrated, and not a lot of that's what it's presented as. But I've heard the comms throughout OG, and I can tell you he did do that. Like Issa, I actually thought was pretty brain dead in OG. And essentially NBK would just micro him around the sites or tell him what the setup was, or where he's going to look, or where you're going to look, or what time you're going to... Like, this guy knew what he was doing, so I think that could be a massive advantage when you're in a team where the most experienced player, aside from you, is 19-year-old Frozen. Then after that, it's probably fucking Dexter. You're with a whole load of inexperienced players, so NBK can bring a lot to the team, a lot of little tweaks, and he could have a massive impact, funnily enough, like he's always wanted to, on the better teams that he was in previously. He's obviously got a veteran presence. He has a great work ethic, always has. He has a winner's mindset. It's actually something that's cost him his personal relationships, and sometimes even professional relationships in certain teams, being the guy who won't just rest on their laurels or say, who cares, or just fuck around. Just is that driven to want to win and find a way to solve the problem, even if that means you have to cut someone who's very well loved in the team or used to be a great player. I think, quite frankly, he's been around the stars. He knows how they operate. He can potentially help some of these guys be molded into a star. Imagine if you're Torzsi and you can just turn to MBK and go, so what was it like when you were with Kenny S? How did he practice and play? Or if you're someone like Frozen and you can go, so how did Shock's master become a... Like, you can ask these questions. This guy knows he was fucking there in all stages of these people's careers pretty much. And he's been a star himself and isn't anymore. He's played all these roles in the game. So as a result, like, you look what role he's going to play. Let's just be real. He can fit wherever he's needed. That's going to be his role. He's going to be the glue guy, not in the personality sense, but in the sense of just making the rest of the team fit together. He's going to be the sort of structure behind the squad, hopefully along with Dexter. So I think it's obvious he ends up certain maps in supportive roles, in entry roles, depending on the map, depending on the situation, depending on how other people play and how their experience shows out in the game. I also think, even in OG, his fragging was actually better than people remember at certain periods of time. You could go and he could get some work done, he could still be pretty legit. And then I'll just say this, I did a whole video on it. This is one of the most decorated, talismanic players in the history of CSGO. I didn't say French CS, I didn't say this year, all of CSGO. This is one of the greatest players, winners, impact individuals, influences to ever be involved in CSGO. A truly epic player. This is a guy who has had 9 straight years, we can't know about this year yet, in a team that at some point during the years ranked top 6. This is unbelievable longevity, and there's a reason why he reinvented himself a million times and never stopped fighting to be good. Then after NBK, for some people a little bit more of a touch and go ad, but as I say, the key thing here is don't think of it as they took out Acor and Rops and they're bringing in NBK and Torzsi. It's like, no, listen, if anything, Torzsi, yes, role for role replaces Acor, but that doesn't mean that NBK replaces Rops. If anything, Frozen replaces Rops, and then who knows what you do with VMAS's spot and what Dexter's doing. That's the thing for me. So I'm just talking about rounding out the squad. This is the totality of the squad we're talking about, not some like one-to-one comparison. So Dexter basically is one of the last 2 left. I'll just be short. I'm not a big fan. He looked really good when he was just fragging out in Renegades in Australia/Oceanic region. This ain't Renegades, this ain't the Oceanic region, and this ain't years ago, mate. Yaz doesn't look that good to me. He's just an okay player. If you didn't tell me the story about coming from Australia, I wouldn't even fucking know anything about this guy. I'd just be like, no, I'd just replace him if I didn't have the nameplates on. He's just okay. So I don't get it personally. Beyond the gimmick and the narrative, this would be a player I'd be considering replacing if this team doesn't work out. Then you've got your last boy, BMAS. Now, speaking of people surplus to requirements, this guy still needs a lot of work. He was nowhere near ready when he joined FaZe Clan. He was iffy when he was in the last MOUZ spots. This probably needs to be the year that BMAS really shows you something. Otherwise, he just doesn't need to be there. There's other players. There's better players. There's something also I've got to say. I get a vibe that he gets a little bit too shook when it's the big games. Like, there's something's been a bit off about his performance in the pro scene based on the stories people were saying about his skill and his potential, blah, blah. He does seem to have some skill, just doesn't seem to be able to get it out in the server that much, and seems a little bit lost on what his identity as a player is, or confidence in what his role as a player is. So I want to see actually how he's guided. This is another reason why I would consider potentially replacing a Dexter, because if you could put in a great or a much more experienced IGL, I think they could figure out someone like a BMAS, and if it's not going to work out, they'll tell you it ain't going to work. Like, I've tried everything, and then you can just cut him happily, right? Now, there is a person in this team who does have experience in CS who can provide some of these sort of qualities, and that is actually their coach. So their coach is Cyclone, who was the NXT coach, the Academy squad, and they promoted him. By the way, perfect thematically for bringing up torzsi, who you've now got and you had when he was in the MOUZ team. So hopefully you're comfy with him. You'll know how to use him. You're not having to like figure him out as a player. You've just used him as your star player. Then also, if you do indeed what either as stand-ins or in the future bring in someone like JDC or someone else in the Academy squad, there's a bunch of interesting players there. You've already got the guy who coached them. He's ready-made to integrate you. And in theory, you could even very easily hook back up the Academy squad and see what's going on there and then bring them through. So I think MOUZ, the key thing here to me is this isn't just make a new roster after the roster minion. This is like a potential pipeline of talent for the future. And if it works as a pipeline, like players see, instead of just fucking around in the 39th best team in Tier 2 playing in Pinnacle Cups, what if instead I was actually to join the Academy squad of MOUZ? I see they have one of the best Academy squads, and they end up actually promoting their players, or at least considering it, if you show your skills off there. That'd be a great way to even get talent to go to the Academy squad for cheap, right? So I think there's a massive potential here for this to be a game changer, and then to continue getting that steady pipeline of talent. Because I tell you what, I don't know who it is. It can't be one or two people. I've known some of the people behind the scenes in MOUZ/MOUZ spots. It's a different set of people. And this is actually akin, in my opinion, to what Fnatic's done in League of Legends, similarly with different people. But somehow these two orgs, MOUZ Sports and CSGO, Fnatic and League of Legends, have done a phenomenal job year on year just finding the next talents appropriate to the level of the organisation. Like, it's ridiculous how well they've done. And they've done another great job here, in my opinion. So you look at this team, it's actually a pretty well-rounded squad. The last squad was a mess. It was just all these misfit pieces put together, and it didn't really work out. Just Rops carried, and then Frozen was pretty good most of the time. You look at this team, it has star power. You've got Frozen already. He's totally primed to now become a superhero. Instead of being a Robin, be a Batman. And then you've possibly got torzsi as well as a top player, and that's your AWPer. Then you've got firepower, you've got Frozen, torzsi, and BMAS potentially. If you can actually get BMAS working, there's a bit of firepower. That's not bad right there. You can go head-to-head with a bunch of the teams that are 10 to 20 in the world with that type of quality, right? You've got a mega veteran in NBK who's way overqualified to be in a team like this. I think even in this point in his career, I don't care that people think this is trolling or something. I actually would have considered him, in my opinion, for teams like Fnatic, FaZe Clan. I actually think he could have added a lot to some of those squads, but whatever. That's by the by now. I think this squad has some nice upset potential. I don't think they're going to be a top 10 team. Probably hard to even stay in the top 15. I don't quite know. It depends basically what happens with torzsi. But if he ends up being really good, I actually think they can have some nice upset potential, especially on the fragging maps. And I'm really interested to see this squad. I actually think for a tier 2 team, it's a pretty nice squad, well put together. Pieces I want to see how they do. People I want to see how they perform in the rest of their career. A couple of pivots, I think, like obviously BMAS and Dexter, I think you could potentially consider replacing. Like if I could get MSL tomorrow or Snappy instead of Dexter, I'm doing it in a heartbeat. If I could get instead of BMAS some of the other talents in this, Jacom or fucking Sonny, anything, I get some of these guys in a heartbeat instantly, right? And I've already got the young talents in someone like torzsi, so I think this squad actually, it's a canny little squad. I'm not expecting big things, but I'm certainly interested in terms of the individual players, how some of them are going to fare, and I actually think as an overall squad, they could make for some good games.
This is Kenya's the #1 AWPer in the world, according to Thorin. You're watching Thorin channel, that is also known as the #1 existent fan in the world.
This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadjou, Iskander, Mac Pugnatio Rajcula, Travis Goff, Adam Ochs, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Hades, Jensen Goh, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Thooorin, William Peyton Lacy, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and a special thank you goes out to Jerky's Minion as always. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my content? Want to ask me a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers? Find out who the guests are going to be on my shows. Maybe you want to be part of one of those lengthy but in-depth and interesting discussions about esports with yours truly. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Squilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.